All right, that's going. So let me get
Thank you.
back up. No problem, no problem. Oh, come on. There we go. All right. So, welcome everyone. I'm Iselda de Narbonne. I live out in Atlantia in the DC area. I'm a singer. I play the harp, and I'm kind of an early music geek. I'm very into medieval music in particular. Um, and so when I got started in Bardic in the SCA, I was interested, like most of what I heard was very, very cool kind of SCA style songs like, Master Hector singing Rise and stuff like that, which is very good and it's part of the folk tradition and it's cool and valid for a lot of reasons, but it doesn't sound anything like what people were singing in the Middle Ages. And so I really wanted to kind of look into what that music would have sounded like and how to write songs in the SCA for the SCA that sound medieval. And so that led me down a years long music theory rabbit hole. And you are going to get some of the results of that rabbit hole today. So basically, when we as modern people are writing a song, we have certain patterns and expectations in our head that we hear when we're writing music or listening to music, even if we don't know it, even if we're not aware of it, even if we don't know how it works, we hear it in our head. For example, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I'm going to be playing some examples on my iPad. This would be the playing of the examples would be a lot smoother if I were at my piano, but my husband's going to be putting my daughter to bed during this class, and that will go a lot more smoothly if I am upstairs on my iPad and not downstairs in the middle of things. So we're all used to the idea of, hold on. We're all used to the idea of major and minor, right? So major is kind of happy. That's a major scale. That's a major chord. Minor is a little spookier, right? That's a minor scale. That's a minor chord, right? Major happy, minor spooky. And so the songs that we're used to hearing and the songs that we will sort of automatically write, even if we don't know what these terms major and minor mean, are going to be in a major scale or a minor scale. The major scale looks like this, right? And the minor scale, you are flatting the just certain notes in the scale, so it will sound a little bit different. People write in minor scales. If you're just sort of like making up a melody that you want to sound spooky, you will write your melody in a minor key, even if you don't know what notes should be flat, because we're just so used to hearing those notes together sounding spooky. It just sort of automatically happens. These are the major and minor chords that I just played for you. And in addition to having these two kind of scale configurations, major and minor, we are really used to thinking of melodies as having chords that go underneath them that kind of hold the melodies up, right? Think of them as the scaffolding for your melody. So for instance, this is Happy Birthday. And hold on, it sounds something like Happy Birthday. What am I? Okay, that's the starting note. Happy birthday to you. Nope. See, I told you this is going to be rough. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. And even if you're just hearing somebody sing the melody, even if there are no chords there, whether you know it or not, your brain is kind of filling in those chords underneath it. Even if you can't hear it in your head, even if it's not something you can pinpoint or know that this happening, that's kind of happening. And so if any of you are used to singing harmony, just sort of spontaneously, like if you're sitting around in a bardic circle, somebody's singing a song, you start spontaneously singing harmony. What you're doing is you're choosing notes that are in that chord that you instinctively know holds up the melody. You don't have to know how chords are constructed. You don't have to know what the notes that you're singing are. Your brain just sort of automatically supplies them because we are so used to hearing these chords and specific chords going in specific places in melodies. It's just really, we've heard it so many times that it becomes instinctual. Not only that, but we're used to hearing certain progressions of chords, right? We're used to hearing certain chords coming in certain orders in lots and lots of different songs. And so if you're writing a song, you're writing a melody, you are likely to instinctively choose one of these very common chord patterns, chord progressions, that will hold up whatever melody you're coming up with. And I'll give you a couple examples. And this might, again, be a little bit rough because I'm on my iPad. But I'm going to play some chords. And if you can figure out what song these chords are from, unmute yourself and let me know. I'm going to start over. Sorry, I told you this was going to happen. Okay.
I think I know.
Taco Bell's Canon.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So. etc. But how about this song? Maybe some of you know this song. Do you have the time to listen to me whine about nothing and everything all at once? Right? One of my favorite composers, Billie Joe Armstrong. Right? So what I'm doing here is I'm illustrating that there are certain chord progressions that are so common that we write melodies to fit them, whether we know we're doing it or not. My guess is if you asked Billie Joe Armstrong at this point in his life to play Paco Bell, like the chords, he could do it. But when he wrote this particular piece, I don't think he was thinking, I'm going to fill Paco Bell. It's going to be awesome, right? It's just that he had heard that piece and other pieces, and there are a lot of pieces written to that same chord progression, that it was stuck in his head. And so when he just sort of went to write a song, that's what came out. This happens to absolutely everybody, and the SCA is not exempt by any means, just because we're sort of trying to get into a medieval mindset. If we set out to write a song, we're automatically going to write in a minor or major key to a familiar chord progression unless we decide to do something differently. Here's an example from the SCA. It's a song many of us know and love. I am my mother's savage daughter, the one who runs barefoot, cursing sharp stones. I am my mother's savage daughter, I will not cut my hair, I will not lower my voice. Or, Jolene, 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 I'm begging of you, please don't take my man. So Windrith, who I love, was subconsciously ripping off Dolly Parton, which means that her subconscious has excellent taste. But that's going to happen to all of us, right? Like, we're going to kind of automatically write songs that fit these modern patterns if we don't deliberately choose to do something else, because it's like it's in our head. And so that's what's going to automatically come out. So I've spent all this time talking about the modern patterns that we inadvertently fall into, so that you know what's going on. And now we're gonna switch, and we're gonna talk about the patterns that people in the Middle Ages fell into, that we can deliberately choose to use when we're writing music. All right. So just like we have certain scales, major and minor, and the idea of melodies being held up by chords and certain chord progressions sort of ingrained in our heads, whether we know it or not, there were certain patterns that were also ingrained in the heads of people in the Middle Ages, whether they knew it or not. And this counts for people who never studied music, who couldn't tell you what the different notes were, who were just sort of making up songs. Everybody heard music that sounded like this so much that these are the patterns that pop up everywhere. And we can learn them, and we can deliberately use them in writing music, and we will write really cool sounding music that sounds medieval. So instead of major and minor scales, picking notes from those scales to build a melody on, the people in the Middle Ages used what we call modes. And modes are basically just another assortment of scales. And the way that you find the modes is if you look at a piano keyboard and you start on any of the white keys and then just play all the white keys up for an octave, that's going to be one of the modes. So what you see on the screen here is mode 1, or Dorian, which is the most common of all the modes. The big difference between modes and modern scales is that whereas we're used to composing melodies that are supported by chords underneath, when you're writing modal music, the important thing is the relationship of any given note to the final. So instead of thinking in chords, play the first note of the scale. That's called the final. It's also often, but not always, the note that a medieval melody will end on. So I'm going to change sounds real quick because I'm going to be playing a whole lot of drones at this point. So whatever you write should sound good and interesting and compelling. It should sound good and interesting and compelling with that one note played underneath it the whole time. And if you can achieve that, instead of feeling like you need to like play different chords underneath your melody, then you're golden. So let me give you an example. This is I'm not going to sing the words because we're really focusing on melodies right here, but there's a troubadour song called Calenda Maya, and it goes like this. And I'm going to play the drone underneath. Actually, you know what? I'm going to just make sure that I have my sound settings right, and then I'm going to share my screen again. All right, so I'm going to play the drone underneath and I'm going to sing the notes. So that's basically the melody of that song. And when you play that final note, the bass note of the mode that it's written in, it sounds great, right? It works. That's kind of what we're going for instead of putting chords underneath a melody. So now let's take a look at some of the different modes that people in the Middle Ages composed with, because right now we sort of think in terms of major and minor scales. We have these sort of two ways of, I have two modes basically, but you had more options in the Middle Ages, which is fun and gives you more to work with. So this is mode 1. It is Dorian. It is in your you've got all of these modes in your handout, and for those of you who came a little bit late, that's totally fine. I'm dropping the link in the chat again to the course handout where you can find all of the modes listed that we're going to talk about and a little bit more information and some of the melodic patterns that we'll be talking about too. So this is mode 1. It's Dorian. This is the most common mode in medieval music. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the final, and then I'm going to sing the notes of the scale so you can kind of get get it in your head and hear how it sounds, right? So this is the bass note, and Dorian goes D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, C, B, A, G, F, E, D. That's how that goes. And an example of a piece written in Dorian. This is O Rubor Sanguinis by Hildegard of Bingen. No, I'm going to sing Caritas Habundat because that's one I have in my head. That is an example of the beginning of a piece written in Dorian. As we go through all of these modes, you will probably note that each one of them makes you feel a little different, right? Like we were talking about, major is happy, minor is spooky. Same thing goes for modes, except there are more modes, and so there are sort of more shades of feeling that they might inspire in you. And in your handout, you've got the modes listed along with the shades of feeling that various medieval music theorists identified with them. But it's up to you, right? Like whatever you wind up feeling in a given mode is what you as a songwriter should run with. Come on. All right. We're not going to go through every single mode right now. We're going to go through the most common ones. Mode 3 is Phrygian. And like for those of you who are really interested in music theory, the even numbered modes are all called like Hypo-Dorian, Hypo-Phrygian, Hypo-Lydian. Those are basically like transpositions of the mode that comes before. So if you're writing something in Dorian and you suddenly want to like drop down a fifth and start messing around in the lower register, you'll probably be writing in Hypo-Dorian, and it's fine. Like you can, that works. Going from Dorian to Phrygian in the same piece, though, would be crazy. Like, that would be very wacky. It would be like a huge gear shift, and it would be very strange. But so here's what Phrygian sounds like. E, F, G, A, B, C, D, D, C, B, A, G, F, E. This is the spookiest of the modes, in my opinion. You've got that minor second, right? E, F. It's super dissonant. It's like, it's great. Here's an example of a piece written in Phrygian. This is another one by Hildegard of Bingen. Deus enim rorem in illas misit. So you could really hear that Phrygian crunchiness at the end, right? In illas, because you're leaning into that minor second. Oh, so good. Minor second is this interval right here. It's so good. Anyway, that's Phrygian. The next mode that you might choose to compose a piece in is Lydian. Here's what Lydian sounds like. F, G, A, B, C, D, F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F. It's almost a major scale. It's so close to being a major scale, right? It sounds really happy until you get to the B, right? F, G, A, B. That's a tritone. That is like the most dissonant, crunchy interval in music theory. And they certainly thought that it was dissonant and crunchy back in the Middle Ages. They called it like Diabolus in Musica, right? The devil in music. That's the devil's interval, right? And so Lydian is neat because you've got this sort of beautiful, calming, tranquil mode with a tritone right in the middle of it. And I love it. So here's an example of a piece that's written in Lydian. Those of you who are part of my choir Falsa Musica will be really familiar with this piece at this point. Viderunt omnes finester. So that tritone just comes in right at the end and introduces a little bit of like, let's resolve. So that's Lydian. And the last mode that we're going to look at today is Mixolydian, mode 7. This one starts on G, and this is what this one sounds like. G, A, B, C, D, F, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G. Again, it's almost a major scale. It sounds very nice and tranquil and happy. It's just got the second to last note at the top is a little bit lower than you expect. You got that flatted seventh, which is what makes it interesting. So here's an example of a piece written in Mixolydian. And electus meus loquitur mihi surge That's another one that we sang in Falsa Musica. And that one is a love song. It's from the song. It's liturgical, but it's from the Song of Songs, and it's like talking about your lover, and it's wonderful. So those are like the four big modes, what we call the authentic modes, the odd-numbered modes. And what I recommend that you do if you're trying to write a piece of music in a medieval style is think about kind of what mood you want your piece to have, and then choose a mode according to what mood you want your piece to have. So if you want something really happy and tranquil, maybe go with Mixolydian or Lydian. If you want something super freaky, go with Phrygian. If you want something that sounds sort of normal, I guess, go with Dorian. Dorian was by far the most common mode in the Middle Ages, but you see all of these. None of these are exactly rare. And when you want to compose in a mode, what I would suggest you do is first just play the notes in the scale over and over and over and over and over again to get them in your head. Once you've done that a whole lot, a melody might start to sort of pop into your head once you really get familiar with the notes. And then as the melody starts popping in your head, play that drone, right? Play that first note of the scale so that that is what's in your head instead of chords trying to like sneak their way into your music. So play that final, play that first note of the mode while you're kind of improvising with the notes in the mode while you're writing a melody.
I've got a question just kind of as a beginner person.
Go for it.
These are all white keys on the piano? I don't see any sharps or flats. This is just naturally into that progression?
That's correct. So the way that you find the modes is you start on the first note and then you play up through the white keys on the piano, and that's how you get various modes. So for instance, you might hear people call this mode that we have on the screen right now, you might hear people call it Mixolydian, you might hear people call it mode 7, and you might hear people call it G mode, because this is what you get if you start on a G and you play up and down the scale. There is a question, and why I can't see people's names, but the gentleman with the carrots in the background, I saw your hand go up.
Hi.
Hey. Courtney, now I can see your name. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I'm noticing that this sounds very much like Gregorian chant.
Mm-hmm.
So are we talking about music that would have primarily been performed in a church setting, or?
These modes were ubiquitous. So Gregorian chants were written in these modes. However, everything else was also written in these modes. If you look at the troubadour music, very secular, like talking about how they have the hots for some girl, that's written in mode. Some of the pieces that I just sang were Gregorian chants, but this is across the board. It's not restricted to church music.
Okay, so if you were performing a secular piece,
mm-hmm.
would it still have involved the drone and a melody on top?
Yes. So secular pieces like troubadour pieces and other pieces like that, they're still written in this modal way of writing music. They're still going to work with a drone. Mm-hmm. And in fact, playing a drone is a really common method of accompanying, a very simple but common method of accompanying this music, including secular music like troubadour music.
Okay, so if you were going to perform, for example, a troubadour piece,
mm-hmm.
and you were to have an instrument with you,
mm-hmm.
the instrument would just provide the drone.
There are different things that the instrument could do, but a drone would probably be a big part of it. Okay. So that would be a good place to start. Like if you were singing a troubadour piece and you had somebody playing the VL mm-hmm. accompanying you, it would be good to start off with them just playing the drone. And then there might be places where they can add little ornaments and things like that. Mm-hmm. But that drone would probably be the basis of the accompaniment.
Okay, so there would have been would the drone ever change? Would it involve multi-notes? Or?
It might. So in some cases, the drone, there might also, so you're going to have a drone on the final, and that should work throughout the entire piece. But there will be some places where it makes sense to add the fifth or maybe the fourth. And yeah.
Okay.
Basically, yeah.
Okay, I got more questions, but I don't want to stop you. So.
Okay, cool. Save them for the end for sure, and we can get to them. Does anybody else have any questions right now? Does anything not make sense? I'm trying to scroll through, and let me check the chat real quick because I don't have that right in front of me. Aha, nothing in the chat. Great. Okay, so we're gonna keep going then. So we talked a little bit about how to compose in a mode. Play the notes in the scale over and over again to get them in your head. Play that final while you're improvising a melody. And there are some other kind of tricks and patterns that people in the Middle Ages seem to have used a whole lot that we can also use when writing original melodies. There's such a thing called a reciting tone. All of these modes have a reciting tone, and this is the tone where in Gregorian chant, you're going to hang out on and like say a lot of words on. So like da 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 da, right? I think when we think of chant, like we kind of think of something sort of plodding and like hanging out on a certain note with like a little bit of up and down, but that's the reciting tone. That note that they hang out on for a long time is the reciting tone. And every mode has a different reciting tone. It's like in this case, in Dorian, it's the fifth, right? You're going to start on D. You're going to go up to an A. And quick note. So Dorian, you start on a D and you play the white notes on the piano, and that's Dorian. But once you've got those notes in your head, you can start on whatever note you want, right? Like if this is not a comfortable range in your voice, you can transpose that up. So just like you can have like C major or A major or F major, you can have D Dorian or G Dorian or A Dorian. Just sing the same scale that sounds the same, but start on whatever note you want. There was no fixed pitch in the Middle Ages. If you have a piece of music, like in a manuscript, the note that it starts on is going to be the note that makes it fit on the staff the best, so they don't have to use ledger lines. It's not necessarily the starting note that singers actually used. So you start your pieces wherever you want, whatever feels good in your voice. Anyway, back to reciting tones. In Dorian, the reciting tone is going to be on the fifth note up from the first note. And in some of the other modes it is as well, but not everywhere. So does that require the use of a black key? Yes, if you're transposing a mode, it's going to require use of a black key. In your handout, you've got the list of all the modes, and it also mentions which note in the mode is the reciting tone. And the reciting tone is important because one method of composing melodies that you see a lot in the Middle Ages is you start on the final, you move up to the reciting tone, and then you kind of hang out and noodle around the reciting tone for a while. Courtney, yes, question.
Sorry to bother you again, but
it's okay.
This is something that's been a subject of debate with my musical studies. How do you determine what mode the melody is in?
So let me go back. These are intervals, right? So like from D to E, let me see if I can bring this up on my iPad so you can see more clearly. And I'm gonna, so D to E, right? You got a black note in between. Hold on, bum, bum. That's a major second. So that's happy birthday, right? That's that interval. From E to F, there's no black note in the middle. That's a minor second. It's a little bit like less than a major second. So that's Jaws. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-da, 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 right? So all of these scales are made up of major and minor seconds kind of stacked on top of each other. And where the minor seconds happen, where those little ones happen, is going to determine what mode you're in. So you could be in Dorian starting on like a B, but if it starts off with a major second, and then you have a minor second, and then major, 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 minor, major, it's the pattern of notes that determines what mode you're in. So if you've got a melody with a bunch of sharps and flats and you transpose it to where it starts on D and suddenly you don't have any sharps and flats, you're in Dorian. If you transpose it down to E and suddenly it doesn't have any sharps or flats, you're in Phrygian. So that's kind of how that works. And it takes, if you're not used to like reading music or, transposing and looking at intervals, it can be pretty confusing. But in terms of writing music, you don't really need to be able to read music to write music. You just need to get the notes stuck in your head. So you can if you get the pattern of Dorian stuck in your head by playing D to D on the white keys, you might then be able to start on another note and reproduce that pattern of music. Just like we do, you know, we can sing do, re, mi on any starting note because we're just so used to it. So it's just a matter of getting used to a mode, and then you can sing it anywhere. All right, so going back to the reciting tone. A common technique in writing music was to start on the final, the first note of the mode, go up to the reciting tone for that mode, whatever that what mode might be, and then noodle around there. So in this case, this piece goes Beata viscera Maria Virginis. And what we see happening is this is in Dorian, and we're starting on a D. I promise you that's a D. I don't expect anybody to be able to read this stuff. This is crazy. So that's a D. And we're immediately going up to an A, which is the reciting tone for Dorian. Bea. And then the rest of the melody for this line and the next line just kind of noodles around the reciting tone in kind of an artful way. So if you're out of ideas and you don't really know what to do with the mode that you're getting used to, give that a try. Start on the final, go up to the reciting tone, and then just sort of like do little fiddly things all around the reciting tone. Quick note about this piece, Beata Viscera. It's very musically beautiful, and it's very textually anti-Semitic. And I'm using it as an example because it really shows, musically, it shows this technique of noodling around the reciting tone very clearly. But don't go out and learn this piece to sing at a Bardic Circle in the SCA, please. That would be very bad. If you think it's beautiful, maybe you can learn it as an instrumental piece, but the words are pretty not cool. So that's one way to approach writing in a mode. Start on the final, move up to the reciting tone, and then kind of noodle around the reciting tone.
You have a question on the chat.
In the chat. Let me check in the chat. Thank you very much. There we go. Different clef. Yes, this is a C clef, and you can't see it very well. We're going to see C clefs elsewhere, but just for anybody who's interested, this right here is the clef. It's not the first couple of notes, it's the clef. It looks like a C, and basically whatever line goes in the middle of this clef, is a C. The clefs, there's a C clef and an F clef that you'll see a lot, and they can appear at any line on the staff. So it's not like this line is always C, it's whatever line the clef is hugging is the C. And they can change from line to line, and the clef can even change in the middle of a line. So when you start to dig into musical notation, that'll be fun. All right. I wanted to make a quick note about thirds, since we're talking about writing melodies. One of the things that I've heard people say in the SCA a lot is that they didn't use thirds in period, which is not true. Thirds happen all over the place. The reason that people say they didn't use thirds is that because of the way that instruments were tuned like 1,000 years ago, the thirds sounded a little bit different. They sounded a little bit more jangly than we're used to. So they didn't use thirds in the same way that we do, right? You're not strumming, right? You're not going, happy birthday to you, right? I'm messing this up. Day to you. You're not like strumming chords built on thirds under every single note that you're singing. That would not have worked. But you should feel free to use thirds liberally in your songwriting. And this is an example. This is Viderunt Omnes, which is the piece that I sang when I was demonstrating Lydian mode 5. So you can see that we start on the final. This is an F. I promise you it's an F. If you count down from the C, you will find that it's an F, but you can also just take my word for it. And then we go up a major third, and then we go up a minor third. So this piece starts off with what we call a major triad in music theories, right? Ba-ba-bum. There it is. Third chain, right up front, very prominent thirds. Yay, thirds. And then this piece is full of thirds, right? It just goes bouncing back and forth between over the interval of a third over and over and over again. And it frequently will end phrases on a note that's a major third above the final, right? So if I'm singing this piece, and I'm going to sing this line here, I'm ending on a third above the final. And you probably wouldn't end a piece on the third above the final. You probably would come home to the final, but don't be scared of thirds in general in the middle of your song. They're good. Use them. Everybody loves them. Okay. Moving on from that, so we talked about the technique of going from the final to the reciting tone and noodling around the reciting tone. Very valid thing that people did all the time. But just like we have certain chord progressions that we're used to hearing and kind of automatically use, like Pachelbel. Billy Joe Armstrong used Pachelbel chord progressions when he wrote Basket Case. There were certain melodic riffs, like little bits of melody, that pop up everywhere in medieval song. And so I'm going to show you what some of those are. You have them in your handout. But basically they're melodies that were used in the church to teach people the modes and kind of get the modes stuck in people's heads. However, they show up so frequently, even in secular music, that just like if you didn't go to music school and you don't know how to read music, you can still probably, fill in what sounds like a major chord underneath music, and you can probably still sing do, re, mi, even if you don't know that's a major scale. People who might not have had any relation or connection with the church, or who were not educated in the church, or who never went to church, would still have these little bits of melody stuck in their head because they show up everywhere, right? If you live in Paris and you're listening to Trouvère songs, these riffs are going to get stuck in your head, even if you never set foot in a church, because they're just so all over the place. So what you can do is you can look at these little bits of melody and you can build a melody for a song based on that. This is an example of a piece from the Middle Ages that resembles one of these little bits of melody. So this is mode 7. And you can see that this right here is the melody that was used to teach mode 7 in the church. And you can see that the first 4 notes of this sort of teaching melody are exactly the same as, just take my word for it if you can't read medieval notation, but these first 4 notes are exactly the same. After that, the teaching melody kind of starts to move down in a halting way. So, ba-da-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. Very, very similar. And then the last 3 notes are also the same. Ba-da-da-da. So this is ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. And this is ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da- it's adding little extra notes to kind of ornament the teaching melody. So if you were to do that, if you were to take one of those little bits of melody from the handout that I've linked to, and maybe stretch it out a little bit, maybe kind of add some extra notes or ornaments, you would automatically wind up with a melody that sounds very, very medieval, because that's exactly what songwriters in the Middle Ages did. And you've got bits of melody for all of the different modes in your handout. And the last example I'm going to give is based on the psalm tones, which you also have in your handout. So again, originated in the church, but so much of medieval society would have heard the Psalms sung so often on these psalm tones that they're just stuck in your head like do, re, mi. And so then they go out, people write secular songs, and this is sort of the little bit of melody that's stuck in your head. This is what's going to come out. People who don't go to church or are not connected with the church are going to hear these patterns in secular music and put them in their own secular music. So they just get everywhere. When you're reading the psalm tones notated like you have them in your handout, you've got your kind of opening intonation formula, which is what it's called, and then these notes that look like boxes. This just means reciting tone. So if you were intoning a psalm, it would be I'm singing a song and a psalm, and I'm doing most of it on the reciting tone, and I'm done now, right? And then you're going to end it on that sort of final cadence there. So this is the psalm tone for mode 8. And this is a bit of medieval melody that somebody wrote, and you can see that this person had the psalm tone to mode 8 stuck in their head when they were writing this, because, and just take my word for it, if you can't read music, it's totally fine. The first 3 notes are exactly the same in both. And then the melody kind of noodles around the reciting tone, which is C. And then, with a couple of extra notes thrown in for decoration, it basically makes its way back down to the final in the same pattern that the psalm tone does. So the psalm tones are another set of melodic formulas, basically, that you can use when you're writing music. Start something off with the intonation formula, and close out your phrases by sort of riffing on the end of the psalm tone, adding some extra notes in for color, little ornaments. That's something that you can do as well. And again, like, I really want to emphasize that while all of these bits of melody, while all these melodic riffs have their roots in the church, they became so widespread. You find songs that incorporate these everywhere with great frequency. I say everywhere, I mean Europe. This wasn't just a Parisian thing or a German thing or an English thing. It was everywhere. And it wasn't just a church thing. Although they had roots in the church, people who were not particularly religious or not particularly like good church-going people in the Middle Ages used these as well. You've got songs about like wanting to seduce the Lord's wife, right? Written by a troubadour, and they're still using this stuff because it's just what people had in their heads. So that's what I've got. I will stop sharing my screen, and I'm gonna put the link to the handout in the chat just one more time for good measure, in case anybody missed it the first time I put it in there. And if anybody has questions, I'm happy to take them. Rojes, I see your hand go up.
Yeah, you haven't really talked much about rhythm. Is that kind of beyond the scope of the class, or?
Yeah, I was really talking about melodies today. Rhythm is an interesting topic, though, and I'm happy to talk a little bit about it. Depending on what set of music you're looking at, rhythm might have been handled in a few different ways. So, and I'll try to confine myself to secular music. If you're looking at the troubadours, most of the music, troubadours and trouvères, most of the music seems to make sense, either giving every note roughly equal duration, like bum, 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 ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, right? That's a melody that we think was written by Richard Lionheart. Or the rhythm would sort of be kind of like a very free-flowing declamatory rhythm. So not even a rhythm, like you're singing the notes, but you're singing them in kind of in the same cadence that you would if you were speaking the words. So that's something to play around with. Like if you're writing a love song or something like that, and you want to get like a really cool medieval feeling that's going to work really well, but also kind of set your piece apart from more modern sounding songs. That sort of declamatory, free flowing, we don't have a time signature, we're just kind of doing whatever we want. That is very, very medieval. However, sometimes you want to write something with rhythm. Sometimes people are going to want to dance to something. This was also a thing in the Middle Ages. So, the most common sets of rhythm that you might find are what we call the rhythmic modes. And it's completely different than the modes we've been talking about so far. The rhythmic modes are sort of rhythmic patterns that pop up all over the place. They're not in the handout, but if you Google rhythmic modes, you'll get a very helpful Wikipedia article that will show you what the rhythms are. But basically, mode 1 is like dun 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 dun, and mode 2 is bump ba bum ba bum ba bum ba bum. And then some other ones are like dun 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 dun, or dun 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 dun. And again, if you Google it, you can pull them up. But these are the rhythms that came up the most. They're all in 3, right? So it's like 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, or 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. Which is not to say that all songs from the Middle Ages are written in that kind of ternary meter, but a lot of them were. So if you're looking for a pattern to emulate, those are good ones. All right. Somebody put in the chat that the rhythmic modes feel to him like the musical equivalent of poetic meter, and that's exactly right. That's very true. And music theorists did link them to the poetic meters. So like one of them is called iambic, right? Da-dum, 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 da-dum. One of them is called trochaic. Dum, da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. That's exactly what's going on. Very good. All right, any other questions? Trying to see if I left anything out.
Have you written any songs using this?
So no. Basically, like, so my story is that I started off wanting to oh no, I have. Yes, I did. I started off wanting to write new music in a medieval that sounded medieval. And the farther I got into medieval music, the more I just wanted to sort of roll around in the medieval music and play the medieval music, and I've been writing less and less original music. However, I did write a piece. I was trying to make it sound like, if you know Das Hildebrandslied, the Hildebrandslied, it's like an old High German epic. It would have been written in Germany, or like it was written down in Germany probably around the year 1000 or in the 900s. But probably it was transmitted orally up until that point. And so I was trying to write it using the patterns and music theory and stuff like that would have been active at the time. And so I wrote it in Dorian. And I did exactly what I recommended you do. I played the scale over and over and over and over and over again until finally I like had it in my head and a melody came to me, and then I just played the final on my harp over and over and over again as I wrote the song. Courtney, I see your hand up.
Yes.
Oh, Robin, sorry.
Would the rhythm of the drone change?
The rhythm, so you can kind of do whatever you want with the rhythm of the drone, right? If you're, you want it to work with, if you're writing in a rhythmic mode, you want it to work with that. But yeah, depending on the song that you're writing, it's reasonable to just have sort of a steady, constant drone, or you could have more of a driving rhythmic drone. I play the harp, and so I kind of have to reiterate the drone over and over again because it's not a violin. I can't hold notes, or it's not a VL. I can't hold notes. And so, yeah, either depending on the song, I'm either going to have kind of like a very regular, sedate drone, or if it's more of like an upbeat, dancey tune, it's going to be a little faster and a little peppier. For the old High German style song that I wrote, I was writing it, again, inspired by the Hildebrandslied. I was writing it about the relationship between a father and his son. And So I kind of tried to make the drone sound a little bit like a heartbeat, kind of like a constant heartbeat going through the song, which, I mean, I can't tell you that there's a medieval music treatise that says sometimes drones sound like heartbeats, but it seemed appropriate. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And also, with the rhythmic modes, could you mix them up to within the song, or would you have to use the same one just for the whole song?
No, you can mix them up. So like I was saying, it with the melodic modes, it is kind of weird when you mix them up, unless you're mixing up like 1 and 2 or 3 and 4, like the Dorian and the Hypodorian, or the Phrygian and the Hypophrygian. That works, but otherwise it doesn't really work to mix them. But with rhythmic modes, it does. You can do that. So
Okay.
yeah. All right, there's some stuff in the chat. What's going on? They're like a time signature, kind of, but you can go back and forth. Like if you're singing a rhythmic mode, like dun 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 dun, the time signature is really more like 6/8, which is not a thing that anybody in the Middle Ages would ever have said. 6/8 time signature was not a concept yet. But they all kind of fit together because they've all got that 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 feel. So you can mix them up really well. All right. All right. Any other questions? All right. Did everybody get the handout that I put a link to in the chat? Okay, great, excellent. I think what I neglected to put in the handout is my email address. So I'm going to put that in the chat as well. If you are going through and trying to use any of these concepts and you get messed up or mixed up or you can't remember what I said or something like that, feel free to reach out to me through email. I love to geek out about this stuff. And yeah, thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you so much, Magistra Iselda, for starting this project.
Hey, yeah,
So much. Cool. What an honor to have you. Thank you so much for sharing knowledge and your absolute wonderful talent.
Wonderful. Thank you for inviting me. This has been a lovely evening. Yay.
Thank you. The recording is going to be posted in the Outlets University, so you can, if you want to watch it again or ask your friends to watch it, you guys can go to the Atlantis University.
Yep. And Eliath, I will send you the recording soon once I've got it downloaded on my computer and everything.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right.
And for next month, we're going to have, because this is a monthly meeting, and we're going to have the Honorable Lady Anne Elizabeth Morley. She happens to be around here somewhere. Yes, she's waving over there. And she's going to be taking care of our April class. Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it. Thank you for the support, and let's keep on making music.
Excellent. Yay. Thank you, everybody.
The world needs more music. Thank you.
Yeah. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you all.